It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, May 2nd, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's going to dig into the bottom six of the Flyers this season and how they used them.
That'd be fun.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade, and I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. This episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. You can turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. And to keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, before we get into all of that, we do have to recognize the Flyers' announcement of the passing of legendary defenseman Ed Van Impe, and 84 years old. So, it's like a weird time because this is going to start being a thing, and it's deeply uncomfortable and very upsetting. But, obviously a huge part of the Broad Street Bullies era, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like when I started watching hockey, right around that age. So I'm very aware of Ed Van Impe. I watched him from the other side and watched how good he was.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he was like a good meat and potatoes defenseman. He got tough when he needed to, and that was most of the time because that's how that team was. And he fit right in, and he fit right in. So yeah, I mean, he was an important guy, and it's a shame. I've all these baseball players and hockey players that I grew up watching, they're all passing away.
Yeah, and he was an original Philadelphia Flyer, and I know we talk about that sweet spot when they won the 2 Stanley
Hmm.
Cups in, 74, 75, but, to have been there from the beginning is a big deal, and I know it meant a lot, is from what I've heard from him over the years, and, he's a member of the Flyers Hall of Fame,
Yep.
well-deserved, and, should have been 700 regular season games in his career, plus some additional playoff games, obviously. I feel like with Ed Van Impe, as far as the pantheon of Flyers players goes, he doesn't get a lot of play. And I
No.
feel like it's kind of annoying to me. He should be talked about more. Obviously, we talk about Bobby Clark, we talk
Hmm.
about Bill Barber, we talk about so many Flyers legends, Bernie Parent, from that
Yeah, and the
era.
Watsons
But
always get talked about more.
yeah,
I
yeah.
get
Well,
it.
why do you think?
Because if you unless you got into a fight or really were outwardly uh trying to murder guys on the ice, for a lack of a better term, he was just doing his job and he was really good at it.
Yeah,
But you know how it is with these kinds of defensemen. You do your job, you're sort of invisible until the big hit, the big fight,
right.
whatever. So, he wasn't a big point producer. Not that many defensemen were back then, but they were starting to be a little bit. So he just get his, probably his even strength points and went about his business and was really good at it and kept getting contracts as a result.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, the other thing too is with defensemen, they do tend to not get as much of the glory. I think
Right.
you're right there. But he was captain of this Flyers
Yeah.
team before Bobby Clark, and I
Yeah.
think for a defenseman to be captain of the Flyers, very big deal.
Yep.
And so, of course, we send all of our love
Although
and best
to be fair,
wishes to
wasn't
his
Jason
family.
Smith the captain for a year?
Listen,
I had to
that was
throw that
weird.
in. It's still
That
the
was a
most.
weird time.
It was a
Weird
weird
time.
time.
And also, as I'm trying to give condolences to his friends and family here,
It just
um,
popped in
you
my
know,
head. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. At any rate, we do send our love and best
Yeah.
wishes to, his friends and his family and of course teammates and, it's just, it's I feel like this era is slowly evaporating, and it's hard to think about in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. Sure.
Checking in on the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. As of now, we only have
Also a
one
very
game.
somber subject at the moment.
Well, it's a 5-game series. They're down 1 game. I'm not in panic mode yet, but we did talk about the fact that game 1 was gonna be extremely important because, getting the right tone against Hershey is important, and also Hershey had had some time off because they had a bye in the first round. Did not go so well. They were shut out 3 to nothing on Wednesday night. Now, it was really kind of a 2-0 game, with an empty netter at the end, but I think the biggest takeaway from that game for me, at any rate, was the fact that now this is a couple of games in close succession, where the Phantoms could not convert on a 5-on-3 power play. And, Alex Bump had a very, very good chance that, in fact, there was this very bizarro review situation around where it was like 3 minutes later they went back to review it, but, and came close, but, it wasn't a goal. And so Hershey was able to then gain momentum from that kill on the 5-on-3 and then scored pretty soon after that. And that made it 2-0. And that kind of put the game out of reach at that point. Bump had 8 shots on goal in that game, by the way,
Yeah.
um, continuing to push really, really hard in these playoffs here. But yeah, not, I don't think they played horrifically, but still, you would have liked to have had a slightly closer game here.
Well, 3 things we talked about. Hunter Shepherd, check. He was always
Mhm.
gonna be hard to beat in this situation.
Yeah, and he
Chase
stepped it up for sure.
Chase Brisky, check. He made himself
Mhm.
known. Louis Belpedio, check. Made himself known in the wrong way. Right? We talked about that.
Yeah,
And he was a
yeah, he
-3.
did. Yeah,
I wouldn't play him
yeah.
next game. No way.
I mean, it's gonna be an interesting choice as to what they'll do next here. Game 2 is tonight. We'll see if they make any adjustments, and of course, we'll talk about it kind of on an interim basis on Monday, but then kinda dive into it more in
The
our
other thing
regular
I didn't
Phantom
like,
Tuesday here.
yeah, and I didn't get to see the game. I just saw some highlights and whatever, but I look at the stat sheet, I rip it apart. When you take away the shots from Alex Bump and Ali Lixel, uh, that was like 14 out of or 12 out of their 26 shots.
Yeah,
That's not great.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
was Jet
I did notice
Luchenko?
that.
He had 1 shot.
Right, and that is also something we talked about, that he was
Yeah.
doing good at getting some opportunities and making some great passes, but he needed to shoot more himself and get shots through, that he was
Yeah, I'm
getting
not saying
shots
he needs to
blocked
be a
or
big goal scorer. I kinda look at
right.
him like a future Dylan Larkin, like that kinda guy, and if he's gonna do that, he's gotta shoot more. That's where I get
Yeah.
at with that.
Yeah, we absolutely needed to see more of that from him, but like I said, we'll talk about that more on Monday to see where the Phantoms have netted out in their playoff series so far. Speaking of affiliates here, we hadn't talked about the fact that the Flyers officially announced that Reading will be their ECHL affiliate for at least another 2 more years. That's good to see. You just like the consistency of it with the system, especially, I kind of jokingly say goaltender development, but nonetheless, that's an important aspect of the Flyer system, is having games available for goalies to play.
It is, and it's a good hockey city. I've been there a couple times. I was there for the All-Star game, which was a lot of years ago, the ECHL All-Star game, and I really like the spot. I like the people there, and I think that it's a good franchise to hold on to because it's close in proximity. It
Yep.
makes sense.
It does. They lost in their first round playoff series this year, so they're out of the Kelly Cup playoffs for the ECHL, but we will see them next season for sure. And Monday is the draft lottery, so I've upped the ante. I'm doing tankathon spins every day now, just not just on Thursdays when we do our prospect deep dives. It took only 1 spin this time, Russ, to move up, and got in the number 2 slot with the Sabres getting the first overall. And I'm okay with that. Like, if that's how it comes out in the wash,
Mhm.
I think the Sabres have been long suffering in terms of getting that first overall pick. So if they
Mhm.
did this time around, I would not be mad at that, especially if the Flyers wound up getting the second overall pick.
Yeah, I'm sure
But
the McDavid thing still is, rubbing them the wrong way all these years later.
yep,
So it would be kind of nice for them.
It would. And obviously, for the other picks further down, there's some playoff rounds still going. We don't know as of recording who's won the games from last night. So that could have been determined already. We'll discuss that on the Monday show for sure, because we should have some answers about that. But so far, what we know is that the Caps and Canes are going to face each other in round 2 of the playoffs, and the Panthers are going to face the winner of Sens versus Leafs. And a lot of implications for the Flyers in terms of the Western Conference playoffs.
Yeah,
That
sure.
is
I mean,
for
Flyers fans will
sure.
probably be watching the Colorado game.
All right. So we said we're going to talk about the depth forwards. We're going to start off with Ryan Poehling, who was the highlight of the Flyers depth forwards, and we will go from there. We'll do that coming up next.
Did you know your Fire TV is also on Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your pair of controllers, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watching more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Ever want to try out Xbox games without a big upfront investment in a console? Fire TV Stick 4K can be a low-pressure way to start exploring. Head to Amazon.com Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen.
All right. On Monday's show, we will be previewing the draft lottery that is taking place that evening. Lots to talk about around that. Plus, we will have our nemesis of the week. And I mean, I got to say, it's probably going to be ping pong balls, but things could happen.
You
That
don't
will
know
change.
that. Like, why are
We
you
don't know that.
already anticipating that?
Yeah. We'll see. We shall see. I want to start off our conversation here with the Flyers depth forwards here with Ryan Poehling, because I feel like, as we talked about on yesterday's show with our look at Travis Konechny and Owen Tippett became a bottom sixer at some point during the season. Obviously things changed. It was Joel Farabee in there earlier in the season. So we know there was a lot of shuffling in that bottom six, but I feel like the one guy that was the most consistently in a good spot was Ryan Poehling. And I feel like he made the most of it this season. Now, especially the latter half of the season. And we've talked about, what would it be like if he got off to a much better start. But if you look at his overall season, 12 goals, 19 assists for 31 points. That is the best season of his career points wise. And he did it in 68 games. He played 77 games the year before. And so to do that in 68 games, especially when he had a concussion injury, I mean, like, what a good year for him.
It was a really good year. Still with like fewer giveaways, but his faceoff percentage was good at 50.9. Now the one thing, and this is definitely like, I think he can keep up the offense, but now depending on who the coach is in that bottom six role, his hits are way down. And he probably is doing that for a reason, to stay healthy. But that does change his game a little bit. So it does. So like if he's a 4C and he's not hitting much, like, is he going to have to be a 3C on this team because of that? I don't know. Like, that's, to me, it's a question, but he had a really good year.
Yeah, you mentioned his faceoff percentage. That was actually the first time in his career he's been above 50% at the faceoff dot. And I think that is something that was very noticeable. He had his clunkers games here and there, and it depends on the matchups he got. But I thought for the most part, in terms of getting the lesser matchups out there, he was pretty successful at the dot, and I appreciated it. The other thing too is that he averaged 13:53 time on ice, which was slightly less than the previous season. And he got more defensive zone starts than the previous season as well. And yet, again, still managed to up his scoring from the previous year. And I just think like you also have to take that into account that he was given a little bit more difficult situations again, mostly because he moved up from the fourth line to the third line in a lot of situations.
Like, I don't have a stat on this, but I'd be willing to say he might have the same or more rush goals than Owen Tippett, and that's why his shooting percentage is so high. I kind of
Mhm.
remember him getting a lot of those. So
Yeah,
that's
he
a good thing.
did. He
Yeah,
did. Yeah, absolutely, and March was the best month of the season for him, 7 goals
yeah,
and 3 assists, like, very obvious because we
yeah.
watched the games, but I think, you look at that and he's got 1 more year left on his deal, and I think that there's probably a good opportunity for him to get an extension partway through next season. I don't know if they would even consider it this offseason yet, and
I don't
there's
think
probably
so.
some health issues to consider there as well, like, again, with the concussions, and you mentioned the hitting stat related to that. But I do think that there might be an opportunity for him to get an extension, like, midway through like, at the Olympic break or something if things are going well.
I think it depends on Carson Dewart. Like, if he were to really kick
Mm,
in, that could make him available via trade, and if he doesn't, then that makes Paling more available. More
mhm.
valuable rather, and I think that's
Yeah.
probably what they're waiting on to see.
Yeah, I mean, he could be a depth piece trade deadline move too.
Right,
That's,
right.
like, another valid
But only if
option, I
Dewart's
think,
doing good.
for
If
him.
not, Paling's young enough where you'd hold on to him. So, like, that's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree there. I think, with the Flyers depth forwards, there's really like there wasn't a lot of stability there, and it was a lot of
None.
borderline AHL, NHL guys, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of tweeners involved there. And so really I would say the only other stable bottom sixer for the Flyers. Now, Nic Deslauriers was somewhat stable, but useful. No. So we're going to talk about him in the next segment. Garnet Hathaway is the only other part of the bottom six, and he was a fourth liner for most of the games that he played for the Flyers this season. And I think it's really interesting what Garnet Hathaway did this season because his penalty minutes went way down, and that was
Yeah.
very noticeable, right?
It was. I just don't know where he's at as a player. And this is
Yeah.
so I'm looking at StatMuse, and so surprisingly, because I would have thought it might be higher, the Flyers were their fourth line was 24th in goal production. 24th isn't good. And they act like the fourth line's like really good. But we know now, even in this
Mhm.
era, you've got to get points out of your fourth line. And Hathaway's
Right.
part of that. And if he's not getting points and he's not going to be the true enforcer, then what is he? That's what I have a
Yeah.
problem figuring out what he is.
Yeah, it is interesting because he had more goals this season than he did the previous year, 10 goals as opposed to
Right.
7. He was in the positive.
Mhm.
Last year he was a -7. This year he was a +5. So that's good. But, his average time on ice was a little bit down. Definitely felt that. His points per 60 went up, but his shots per 60 stayed the same. So it's like he wasn't attempting any more shots. He just happened to get more in this
Right.
time
Right.
around. But again, with that low of a scoring rate, is that hugely impactful for the Flyers? Probably
Not
not.
really. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
replacement. Like, this is where I do GM speak and think, what's the replacement value for Garnet Hathaway? Because he's going to get 7 goals most years.
right.
So what is his current salary? What is he, like, 2.5, something like that?
It's something like that. Yeah.
Right. So I'm paying 2.5. He's not really fighting as much as he used to. He's not taking as many penalties, so good for him. That's helping. But the other output, yeah, he plays some good defense. Sure. Is that worth another couple of years at 2.5? It may not be. And so,
Right.
like, and that may
And
be
that's
what they come
where
to at some point.
right. And that's where I see. So he's got 2 more years left on his deal. He's at 2.4 to be exact, and which is 2.5 essentially, right?
Yeah.
But I think like to me, you keep him through the end of that deal, and then that's that.
I don't know. I'll
Because,
keep him through this year, and then I don't know.
yeah, I just think he becomes the Nick Deslauriers in the second year of those 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to either one. I'm phasing them both out. Like, I just think if you want to be competitive in this league, you phase both of those kind of guys out. And they're both great in the room. They're both good guys. This is nothing personal. This is
Mhm.
just like, yes, the cap is going up this year. Maybe it goes up the year after. They have more cap money to spend this year, but the year after that, when he's got one more year left on his deal, they'll have more money off the cap. Like Risto, I think will probably be gone by then. You may want to just clear all that out so you could do something bigger. And 2.4 becomes like a number that may make it impactful to lose, and may just trade him to
Right.
somebody else where he just becomes an enforcer again, like Deslauriers, because the salary's kind of high for what he's going to be.
Yeah. Well, he does want to become a broadcaster
Yeah.
eventually. So
Jody
there is
Shell,
that
he's a good
path
one.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, I think they definitely keep him through next season. The year after
Yeah, I
that,
think so
to your
too.
point, could be a question mark, but he's definitely a fourth liner and nothing more at
Right.
this point. All right, we're going to talk about Nic Deslauriers and those other depth forwards and the tweeners and what the Flyers should do for next season for their bottom six coming up next. The Stanley Cup playoffs are in full swing, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. I hope we get that for the Flyers sometime soon. But thanks to Game Time, getting in the door for any of the remaining playoff games is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab those playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. And the prices actually drop as puck drops gets closer, and with their last minute deals you can save up to 60% for sports, concerts, comedy, and my favorite, the theater. Their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and the app even shows you panoramic sea views so you know exactly what you're getting into before you buy. And with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. So the other depth forwards that we have left to talk about really are Nic Deslauriers and Jacob Peltier. And Peltier obviously came in, 2/3 of the way through the season. So it's kind of hard to suss out where he's going to be with this team moving forward. But that being said, we did see him play more under Bradshaw than he did for John Tortorella. And we saw that his average time on ice in March was 9:38 and it became 12:24 in April. And that's a
Mhm.
huge difference, right?
It is. That was a difference. I think at least they had a little window where they could see what he could do. And to be honest, he did what he did in Calgary. Like, it all was very close. Games were close, points were close. It was all close. And that's why I kind of feel like he's a third line or bust kind of guy. Yeah, maybe he could
Right.
turn it to somebody's fourth liner, but I just don't think there's enough truculence there. Like, I think he does, have some feistiness and all, but he's got to make it as a third liner. So you need more offense. So is it worth it for the Flyers to look and see if they get more offense? Sure, it's worth it. Yeah.
Right. And with Peltier, we know he's an RFA. We talked about it
Hmm.
yesterday on the show with the salary cap conversation that we had. And, I think to me, you offer him a 2-year deal at like 1.2. So like
Yeah, something like
slightly
that.
more than he was.
Yeah.
Something like that makes sense because again, with the Flyers being in this kind of no man's land with a rebuild, there are spaces for guys like him in the lineup right
Yes.
now. 2 years from now, where they'll be?
Who
Probably not,
knows? Yeah.
right? But we don't know. And we don't know what kind of player Peltier will develop into. And
Right.
maybe there's a coach that could come in and get the
Right.
most
And
out
that's
of
why
him.
you take a shot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I think that's the kind of deal that he would accept first off, and I think that he knows, like, the chances and opportunities are wide open for him with the Flyers right now, given where this team is and and that there is, I think, a situation where it feels like the Flyers wanted him specifically from Calgary. And so, or at least that's the message that they've sent out, and that I think can build some confidence in a guy.
Yeah, I think, this offseason should be his proving ground. Go home
Yep.
for a month, come back to Philly, don't eat too many federal donuts, but but really kind of push it with whoever is in town and really try and, get all of that going. And you have a chance to bond with these guys ahead of time, which could help your season. And this is a prove it year for him. So like that's the way he should be handling it.
Right. And with Nic Deslauriers, we talked again about him yesterday as well with the cap conversation. Russ, you mentioned a potential buyout for him. That would save the Flyers $1 million on the cap next season, and it would be a $500K cap hit the following
That's
season
fine.
because of but that's fine, right? I have
The
no
million
beef with
savings
that.
is good considering if they get 2 players, like I think that million's
Yep.
gonna come in handy.
I think it would too. So I think it's absolutely worth it. 31 games played, 2 goals, 1 assist. And he's not even like doing what they
No.
supposedly wanted him to do in
He's good in the
the
room,
the
he's
first
great on
place.
breakup day, but, as far as protecting
Yeah,
Michkov,
love
he's
him
not.
as a guy.
Yeah, sure. But as far as protecting Michkov, no, he's not doing that.
No, 7 minutes, 38 seconds average time on ice. Like, I would rather put a tweener in the spot,
Yeah, me
honestly.
too.
If
Yeah.
that's what the Flyers have this next season is a bunch of tweeners filling out the fourth line like we've seen
Mhm.
this past year, like, put a tweener in there instead.
Yeah.
I would rather give somebody a chance, and have, like, an Anthony Richard in the
Yeah, 'cause
lineup,
I mean, the
you know?
pace will pick up. It will help all of those things. That's just a
Yeah.
fact.
And have, like, a more viable 4th line
Right.
out there that can accomplish a lot more, and the matchups will be less scary, to be
Right.
honest,
Yeah.
and that's kinda what you want out of a 4th line. Um, Speaking of those tweeners, I think, you look at it, and the guys I think that were the most active in the bottom 6 that we liked were Anthony Richard
Mhm.
and, Abels, and then to a slightly lesser extent, Ole Lixell.
Mhm.
And Anthony Richard has 1 more year left on his deal, so I think he'll be a back and forth between the
I think
Phantoms,
so, and
Flyers
that's
kinda
fine.
guy again, right?
Yep, yep. I think that's fine. I think let him start in camp, see what he looks like in camp. If he's not lighting it up, send him down. You could always bring him
Yep.
back up. Definitely.
Definitely, and I think with Abels, again, he needs to sign, but we said sign him yesterday if
Right.
he
Like we know
could.
what he can do. You know
Yeah,
exactly what this guy is. So there's no mystery. You're not wondering. There's good to have a little cost certainty right now and also have that guy that another veteran you can count on while the team is still building.
yeah, and I think with Lixell, again, we don't know what they're gonna do here. We think
No.
there's a likelihood that he won't be back,
Right.
but I think that's okay in the grand scheme of things just because there's other
Yeah.
tweeners in the Phantoms or
Hmm.
prospects, and I think, a lot of people are gonna wanna see Alex Bump come up at some
Yeah,
point,
I wouldn't do
and
it.
I don't know.
Nope.
I know,
Not
I
doing it.
know, but, I have to say it, Russ,
Sure,
you
I'll
know?
say it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think there's gonna be a few other guys that are gonna potentially get a chance that could replace the chance that Lixell got, and
Yeah,
I've loved Ollie Lixell. I mean, he does do better at the AHL level, that's for
he
sure,
does,
and
but
I just don't know
there's still a
what they
little more
wanna do with
sussing
him.
out for somebody at the NHL to see if he can make it or not. I
Yeah,
don't think he's had enough
yeah.
opportunity just yet, but he just may not get it here.
I think, what the bottom 6 looks like next season for the Flyers is honestly gonna have a lot to do with what Owen Tippett does this offseason, because I think if he's gonna establish himself as somebody who deserves to be in the top 6, that will then cascade down to the bottom 6 here, but I do think that Poehling and Peltier on that 3rd line is
Yeah.
gonna probably stick around, right?
Yes. Listen, if the Flyers make, a decent free agent pickup for an offensive player, Tippett may not be able to crack the top 6. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And so that's why I say, like, he's gonna be a hinge point, I think, for the
Yeah,
Flyers this offseason, and the bottom 6 will kind of flow out from there. Because I don't know
right.
that Tippett made sense on that line with Poehling and Peltier. I think
No,
the chemistry, he had difficult chemistry with pretty much everybody this season.
he
So,
really did.
but again, like we said the other day, get him on a line with some additional speed and some
Hmm.
additional playmaking ability,
Hmm.
maybe, and get him shooting better. Who knows? But I think the fourth line, though, for the Flyers is a total crapshoot. I think it's
It is.
Hathaway and who the hell
Right.
knows
He's
at
the only
this
one that's a
point.
known right now.
Yeah. And
Maybe
like
Dewart
Hathaway
you can
as
count on for next year, but he still has to have a good
maybe,
camp with a
but
new coach. Yeah, you
I
don't know.
know.
You don't know.
No clue. No
Nope.
clue. I mean, he could end up on the Phantoms. Like
He could.
we don't know. And we don't know what some of the guys who are standing out on the Phantoms, maybe they have great off seasons and they come back
Right.
raring to go too. So I think there's a lot of question marks there for the bottom six. And I think that it's okay to have these questions at this point going into
Oh
next
yeah.
season. But I think that's it. I think the following season, there's got to be some consistency and
Hmm.
some confidence in the bottom six moving forward. But they have one more year to play with this and figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, that will do it for today's show. We will be back on Monday to talk all things draft lottery and give our nemesis of the week. And as a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in those mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts through any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. It's every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale with NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.